Welcome to the Run to Danger podcast. Please enjoy this original song by my good friend Luke Bailey, titled, you guessed it, Run to Danger. We are here for episode 9 of the Run to Danger podcast. I'm very blessed to have my father on. You've seen him the last couple of episodes, so I had to make sure that we got Dad on for his own episode. Jerry Valentin, thanks for coming. So Dad, just real quick, introduce yourself and let us know, how long you've been coaching, how long you've been teaching, what's been going on lately.
I've been teaching for 38 years, teaching English and PE and things like that in high school. I just retired a couple weeks ago. I started coaching before I even got a teaching job while I was still going to college. So I've been coaching for 42 years, and I've split my time between wrestling and football.
Cool. And how did you get into football, first of all?
One of my heroes was my across-the-street neighbor. He was an absolute stud, and he got me into football. So I was 9 years old. I had done Little League baseball and soccer and all that stuff, but he says, you got to go out for football. So I was, at that time, just a non-athlete and 9 years old and scared to death, and went out and sat the bench, but loved it, and that started a 6-year trek of Pop Warner football even before high school. I liked it more than anything else, so I stuck with that, and then that helped me. Puberty was kind to me. Like in 8th grade I was shaving, that and doing 2 terms of first grade, so I was older coming in as a freshman and somehow made varsity as a freshman and played both varsity football and got a spot at the varsity lineup in wrestling.
Nice. And you had a trainer that kind of helped you out. Talk on that, how he helped you lift and kind of take that next step.
Yeah, early on we also did track for a couple years. For the first 2 years of high school, and he was a track guy and a thrower, so shot put, discus, and all that. So he was the first guy to introduce me to weights. And our high school was so old school, like that, practice was over, coaches would lock it up, and that was it. And I begged my coaches to, let me stay behind.
And that was at Wilcox.
Mm-hmm. And even they gave me some cash, and I started building a squat rack. It's not like they would do it. They were like older guys and tired. And so anyways, yeah, this track guy got us going on the concept of lifting. And so 2 of my buddies and I would travel to this guy's garage and start lifting. And then after that, after a year or so of that, my older brother, the bodybuilding thing was going crazy then. It was in the Bay Area. And he paid for my gym dues and would drive me from Santa Clara to Campbell, where there's a big, huge gym, and they had really famous guys come in, and so I started that, and that really helped.
Helped take that next step. And how old were you when you first started lifting?
Well, like I said, first 2 years, freshman, sophomore, lifting for track, and then junior, senior, lifting for the rest of it.
Okay. And then you had an older brother who was really into boxing. So you started boxing before wrestling. When did he kind of show you, the gloves?
Well, I was his punching bag forever, either playing or doing it for serious or whatever. But, he was an ex-pro boxer. He boxed in the Army, went to Vietnam and all that stuff. And he hooked me up with his old trainer from San Jose, and actually the guy had come out and started at my high school after hours. So we would box in the gym, the basketball gym, and then we would go out to his. It was like straight out of Rocky, just duct taped and old school, and trained there. And I really fell in love with it. I didn't ever box in a real match, but we would train a lot and then spar a lot, and I really liked that as a second or third sport.
Just kind of blow off some steam.
Yeah, and then when I first got my teaching credential and started teaching, I was ex-athlete a year away, and I had just stopped playing football, and I was real hungry to compete, and so I found another gym in downtown, the barrio of downtown Azusa. And same thing, duct tape, old guy with a half cigar not lit, just cranky and crotchety, and it was awesome. This guy was a Mexican kid, he's 18, trying to make the Olympic team, and I was like 24 or 25, and I was his sparring partner. That was a lot of fun.
And how long did you train there?
About a year.
Okay. And talk me through your neighborhood boxing ring. And what that setup was like.
It was a dog pen. We had a chain link dog pen in the back for my pit bull, and so it made a nice ring. I mean, it made a nice, whatever. And I remember I was about 18. What's 18 plus 14?
32.
My older brother's 35, and I'm 18, and I'm finally starting to get the best of him. And we're sparring around. He's out of shape, but I'm starting to connect, and he's starting to get mad. It's like, oh no. Anyways, I was enjoying connecting, and like, wow, I've really come of age. And I ducked his right hand. It was one of those slow-mo things. I ducked his right hand. This is in the dog pen. And I saw his left, but my body position was such after ducking that I couldn't move. And I just like, oh crap, here it comes. It was like a slow motion movie, and it hit me, and it was like one of those, like the sound went off on the movie, and I landed and bounced a little bit, and like the camera went sideways, and I was out. And I remember feeling something, and then I remember I was draped over his shoulders, and my mom was doing the dishes, and he carried me past my mom. And she goes, "What's wrong with him?" And he says, "Oh, he's just tired." He put me in my room, and I woke up like this, gloves still on, like an hour later.
Were you just stiff?
Oh, I found out later my mom was so pissed. And that was my first, I didn't know anything about concussions, but I'm sure I had one there.
Oh, yeah. And was that the first time you got knocked completely out?
Oh, yeah.
And not even in football or anything, that was really the first
yeah,
one.
I got hit my senior year. I was playing fullback when we were playing Palo Alto, and I was coming through, and I had this really terrible helmet. I had a giant head, nothing would fit me, so I had this secondary helmet. And this guy was blitzing, and we went helmet to helmet, and same thing, hit the ground. It's like that deja vu feeling. Everything goes horizontal, and I pulled myself out. And back then, it was just like, oh, you got your bell rung, smelling salts, you'll be fine. And I kept going to my coach early on in the next week. I go, "Coach, it's like, I've never been this way. Like, I'm gun shy." And I didn't know anything about concussions, but I'm sure that was my second major concussion.
Right.
But
and you basically just had a flu for
for
a week or two.
I have a picture of it. I'm on the bench, and I'm just curled up, and I got chills. And it's just like, that's what I felt like.
It's the worst.
Yeah.
Concussions suck. So you did boxing, you played football, and when did you start wrestling?
Best friend in high school was a huge black kid, and he basically didn't give me a choice. He says, "You're going out for wrestling." So
that was Mike?
Yeah, Mike Wells, yeah. And so it was just like the next thing. You turned in your gear, and you walked over to the wrestling room, and you went in. And I had a tough coach. He wrestled for San Jose State, and he didn't say much. He wasn't a talker or a yeller, but man, he was stern. And we had a room full of killers. I was in a 4 or 5 man rotation, and they were all section. I had one kid who's a senior, and his brother was an All-American at San Jose State, Bob McDowell, and he was all section. And Mike Wells, my black friend, he was all section. And I had a guy named Jeff Tansel, and he was built like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he had a chipped tooth. And I just remember I don't think he has any parents. He just goes home and lives in a cave because he destroyed me every practice. I was his toy. He'd jump on me early and keep me late, and it was all I could do to not quit. So I'd go home oftentimes like crying, like this sucks. But surviving that first year of total misery, and my whole goal was not to get pinned, not even to win, just not to get pinned.
In practice or matches?
In matches.
Okay.
Or both, probably. Stay alive in practice.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things you tell your athletes now. The next year, it was like so easy.
Because those guys were out of the room.
Well, no, not just that, but just everything you went through, that accumulative suck, all of a sudden you're using that and you're beating people and you know what's coming and no one can hurt you. So
Yeah, you've been through the worst room in the world.
yeah.
When you were wrestling, you had a crazy experience with two of the greatest wrestlers ever. Talk us through that.
Well, the Schultz brothers were in our league. Actually, Schultz and Danny Chade. So first one was Mark. I was a freshman, and I was 155 pounds back when they had that weight class, and my buddy senior was a 165 pounder, and he was a stud. He did those Scottish games where you throw poles and rocks, and anyways, he did that. And he mopped up on everybody, and I'm warming up with him, and he's sweating bullets. I'm going, what's wrong with you, man? He goes, idiot, I'm wrestling David Schultz. Like, don't you know? I didn't know Dave from anybody. And Dave just he just tore his shoulder up. He never wrestled after that. It was like, wow. And then I heard all these Schultz rumors, but I was just new to the sport.
Right.
And Dave was one of those guys at that time. That year he was headed to Tbilisi to win it as a 17-year-old.
Wow.
That's when he had to petition in to get into the California final.
Yeah.
Because he didn't qualify at
sections. Yeah.
Who cares?
The Palo Alto sections.
Yeah. So that was Dave. And then Mark came later. Mark was his younger brother. And I think I was a sophomore or junior. And we're, again, at Palo Alto. This time we're at their place. And the door swings open, and there's a guy standing on his hands. And we're weighing in. We're half naked, and he walks like 40 by 40 by 40. He walks all around the room on his hands, gets to the scale, hops up, jumps on, weighs in, and runs off. And I go, oh crap! I hope I don't wrestle that kid. And so we do whatever, warm up, line up, walk out, and there's Mark, and I go, oh man, this is terrible. Because I remember my friend the year before. Mm-hmm. Anyways, he shakes hand, and I hear this in the background. I hear this, hey, Mark, get out of there. It's like his coach said, quit screwing around. So, oh, great. He's not my guy. So then his wrestling partner came in and destroyed me anyways. But that was my introduction. And then not too long later, I graduated from college. The Olympics are in L.A. My wife, currently, and then gets me a graduation present with wrestling tickets for the Olympics. We go to Anaheim Convention Center, and we get to see them both wrestle. It was awesome.
That's awesome. And that was one of the most memorable Olympics ever because of the move that Mark did, right? Or was it Dave? Mark? Talk us through that.
Well, they both gold medaled, but and Dave, Dave and Mark obviously shared ideas, but we found out later that Dave was such an ambassador for the sport. He learned the language. He learned Russian. He was a nice guy off the mat. Everybody loved him, and he wasn't afraid to ask stupid questions. So he involved a lot of different stuff that he would collect along the way, and obviously year-round wrestler and traveler and whatever, but he really instituted some strange stuff out of jiu-jitsu way back then. He brought the Kimura to wrestling, and it's a great, wrestlers call it a double wrist lock
or key
lock, because if you say Kimura, then referees will freak out and they'll immediately call you on it. Mm-hmm. But it's a great defense to the attack on legs, especially swing singles and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
You go down and you peel them off, and then when you peel them off, you got them in a wrist lock, and you can take it back. You can also throw them with it. So anyways, the Syrian goes against, not a Syrian, Turkey. I don't think they call it that anymore. The country names changed. But anyways, from Turkey, remember the Soviets didn't go that year.
Okay.
But these other Eastern countries were there. Anyways, the guy attacks Mark's legs. He goes into a key lock just as natural as anything, takes him back. And if you use it and the guy buries it in his gut, it's still great, not as painful. But if you ever get it behind, it's like it's ripping every joint you got. And he did. And he flipped him on his back. And the guy's arm, I think his elbow broke, but no one knew because Mark's on top of him. He gets the fall. And it's over. Well, great. He's headed to the finals. Well, later on, they do a review and they say, hey, that's an illegal move. He's disqualified. And I don't know the whole story, but bottom line is somebody did another review and they reinstated him and he wins the gold medal.
Right, or it was pool play or something like that, right? And
yeah.
He won it. Yeah, that was a crazy Olympics. So we'll get back to Schultz and wrestling, but I want you to continue your journey on. So you went to Wilcox. You were kind of a superhero man amongst boys throughout your high school career. Then talk us through like how you went on from there to Azusa and your time at Azusa.
Well, I don't know about superhero. I was a kid that was.
You say that, but we just had Timmy's graduation or his retirement party at graduation.
Oh yeah, those guys.
But all those guys, I mean,
neighborhood kids.
I mean, all the neighborhood kids, they're whispering, "Man, look at those hands! Look at Jerry. He'd probably still kill somebody." And they had a picture of you with the mohawk. And what did you won? You were like athlete of the year at Wilcox in the trophy case.
Yeah, and that's a funny story. I in graduation they announce who won the athlete award, male and female. Well, they go female first, and then they said, and they give her all her athletic accolades, and then they say, and she did this while keeping a blank 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 GPA, honors, etc. Well, they do the same thing for me. They go through all the athletes, and I was a plugger. 4 years of varsity football. That's okay. All league, whatever. I was average with a great work ethic. That's all I had. And then wrestling, same thing. I did okay. It wasn't great, but I stuck around and did some good stuff. Anyway, they give the athlete thing, and then they go, and he did this while keeping a 2.3 GPA. Everybody laughed. I'm like, okay, I deserve that. Yeah. So.
But like you said, you were held back, and you had some learning disabilities coming up.
Yeah.
So it wasn't necessarily that you were a dumb kid. It was just you kind of had your arm strapped behind your back.
No, I was daydreaming all through kindergarten, barely made it out of that. And then first grade was even worse. I don't know what I had. My dad's dyslexic, and I have some form of it.
And I was diagnosed dyslexic.
Yeah, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I had such a great childhood. I think I just wanted to go back and just go play. I mean, I wasn't ready for structure.
Right.
So, anyways, academics came hard, especially math. Math is just like Greek. And it's funny that I became a teacher as a moneymaker, but it really helped me as an educator because I could understand the kid that needed, is he visual, is he textual, is he auditory, does he need all three, does he need repeat? I'm a visual learner, I'm a doing learner. My board's covered by the time I get done illustrating a concept. I love visual word pictures and all that. I think it helped me be a good educator. But anyway, I would go above and beyond. I would work out in the off season where nobody did that. Take it seriously. Had goals. Had visions of playing pro football and all this stuff. And football was always my first love, and wrestling was my kind of like mistress or whatever. So came to my senior year, I had to decide, what do I do? I could have gone to San Jose State. My coach had wrestled with the current coach there, and I could have walked on or get a partial scholarship. And I think they were D2 at that time. I'm not sure. But that was tempting. And then I didn't have any money. My dad was a janitor. My mom was a low-end LVN nurse, and not a lot of cash. And so my things were all limited. I was going to go in the military. I was going to go to junior college. But I wanted to leave home, so I was going to go to a junior college somewhere. I came up here to Reading and went to Shasta College and got wined and dined. I think I got a tuna fish sandwich and a Coke. And I was going to do that or go to Butte. But Mike, again, best friend, black kid, goes to Azusa because our counselor was a Christian and she got us both influenced. And he went there and had a ball and loved it. And so I thought, man, that's where I'm going to go. And so I went there. Back in the Reaganomics days, I got a lot of money for being poor, low income. And so I didn't qualify. And Azusa's NAIA, so they got 80 kids, some of them partially playing, but a lot of them just going as a student. And that's how they kind of funded the program. And I didn't get a dime. I think I got a cafeteria mop job and $30 or whatever, but it wasn't like,
Right.
big deal. But shoot, I got to play football for another 4 years. It was like going to church camp for 4 years. Loved it. Crazy times. And just really enjoyed being an athlete.
And you played with one of the greats, Christian Okoye. What was that like?
Well, we had the Nigerian connection because of the Christian missionary thing. Our missionaries would go over to Nigeria, and we had also great track stars from there too. And they had a connection, and I didn't actually play with Christian. He was at school with me, but he had not yet played football. He didn't go out for college football until his junior year. He never played football. He was actually he was a hurdler and a soccer player in high school. Can you imagine? He was 6'3", 265, and he could squat 700 pounds. I saw him do it.
Wow.
Amazing. He used to run straight up in his college days, and just guys would bounce off him. I saw him go up and in it and land on his neck like a dart and just bounced and ran back to the huddle. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, never plays football, plays small ball, NAIA 2 years, and ends up Kansas City Chief as the prototype big back.
Yeah, that was crazy time. And so how does that line up with your first job as a coach?
Oh, okay. So I'm sophomore year. I'm playing football. My defensive coordinator has also got a second job. He's a high school history teacher and wrestling coach. And he finds out I'm a wrestler, and he says, hey, dude, you come help me. I'm fried. I'm burnt. I'm toast. I need some help. So I said, sure. And so I originally went to Azusa to become a minister. I was called to the ministry, dedicated my life. As a 13-year-old, I was licensed as a licensed pastor at 18, small Southern Baptist church. And so most of my colleagues or my mentors said, you got to go get an undergrad in something else because you're going to go to seminary for another 3 or 4 years postgraduate. I said, okay. So I go to Azusa, and I'm an English major, and, just going to play ball and then maybe go to seminary. But I go to wrestling practice as a sophomore, and I'll never forget it. I just felt like a duck on water. It was like the most natural fit I'd ever felt. Like, this is what I want to do forever. And so I immediately had lunch with my pastor down there, and I said, I need help. I'm in confusion. I'm going to leave the ministry. And he said, no. You're just starting a different branch. This is ministry. Mm-hmm. He says, you have more of a say in the public eye than I could ever have walking on campus. You have more of an influence on young men than I could ever have. Go with it. Mm. And so I did that for another 3 years while I'm going to college, right, while I'm playing football, while I'm married. We're poor as dirt. My wife's working for World Vision, it's like a missionary relief. It's
Like
still going.
YWAM.
No, they actually fed people.
Oh, okay.
I mean, yeah. And so she's a low-end secretary. Our cars barely run. We're just eking it out on macaroni and cheese, and then stuck around. Well, anyways, I graduate, and I stuck around for another year to get my teaching credential, and still coaching. And then now I'm at a different high school in the barrio of Baldwin Park, where the first In-N-Out Burger was ever. And now I'm coaching football. And so I'm coaching football and wrestling and student teaching, a.k.a. working for free for a year.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got a teaching job down there for 3 years more. I hated it down there. I didn't want to live there. But we lived in a nice town, Glendora, and then your oldest sister was born, and it was good times. But I was, again, doing football, doing wrestling, and teaching.
So take us back a little bit. I want you to cover just Grandma and Grandpa's backstory and then what it was like to be raised in their home.
Beverly Hillbillies. We were in Santa Clara, which was a beautiful town back then. Not too crowded as Leave It to Beaver neighborhoods. And anyways, my grandfather was from Mississippi, Louisiana, and he moved my family and my dad out when they were very young, trying to get out of the Depression. They were starving to death. And they came out here, and he started working on the gold dredgers. And it was just a giant floating boat that stirred up dirt, and they would massively take in soil and sort it and get gold. Well, when World War II started, no one had time for that, and they went from gold dredging to machinery and metal forge. And then he became part of the metal forge, which ended up in Sunnyvale. So they bounced around all over wherever there was gold to dig, and then finally ended up in Sunnyvale, which became Westinghouse, and then he became a foreman. Well, my dad was raised in Sunnyvale after all the movements around, and also working for Westinghouse. And he started when he was 17, still in high school, and he worked till he was 40 until they had a lot of layoffs. And then did a stint in the Korean War and all that stuff. Married my mom, who was an Okie from a Stokey, also dodging the Depression and the Dust Bowl, and came out here lived in Northern California. Had my older brother, same mom, different dad. His dad was crazy and left long ago. My brother was a latchkey kid and got taken care of by my grandparents. Anyways, they hooked up and got married later in life, and then had me. And then we were raised in Santa Clara, and my other two brothers were born after that. So Crazy Ed was the oldest, then me, and then my two younger. And lived in just a modest 900 square foot tract home. Back in the day, they bought it for $11,000, I think, in 1940-ish, 45, and sold it for $500,000 from Santa Clara.
Wow.
But, we're slingshots and BB guns and bike ramps and fist fights and dirt clogged wars and sports. And, we used every inch of that front and back lawn and jumped off roofs and, wrestled and boxed and did all kinds of crazy stuff. Thanks to my brother Ed, he was kind of the model. But just right immediately, everybody went into Pop Warner. You played football, you wrestled, and yeah.
And then, so with Grandpa and Grandma, they kind of let you to your own devices. They were very open, and you always told me, Grandpa, as you would walk out the door, he'd say, "Remember who you represent." But you guys had so much freedom, but you were so creative. And, we didn't have cell phones back then or computers or anything. And you guys were so creative. And I wanted to get back to your original boxing ring story, because that wasn't the one I was referring to. Tell us about the garage boxing ring. Yeah.
Well, I think Uncle Tim embellishes a little bit. But Dad converted the garage to a room, and it became, the lounge or And we would invite kids over and have boxing matches indoors, and you know, we knew where all the nooks and crannies were, including, you know, whatever nails stuck out or whatever. I don't know if we purposely do that or that happened one time, but yeah, we would always challenge people to, hey, come on over. We'll you know, let's see who's, you know. So we would have boxing matches in the garage, and you know, it was like a, what do you call that, street fight club.
Uh-huh.
So yeah.
And was the rattlesnake actually in there, or
Oh,
was
yeah.
that just the story?
Yeah, no, that was later on. I was working as a, you know, I would come home from, before I got married. I got married after my sophomore year. Sophomore summer I got married, but before that I would come home and come back and live at home for the summers.
Uh-huh.
And out of high school I got a job at FMC, which is Food and Machinery Corporation, and they actually made tanks at that time. They had a government contract to make tanks, and I was running a 480 manual router, and I beveled the hole where the guy pops up on the tank. I mean, I'm 18 and I'm working swing shift. I'm working 8-9 hours running this thing that's extremely dangerous, and under a heavy pressure to meet the parts limit every night. Everybody smokes like a train. They're all stressed. It's crazy. But I made great money. And so the next summer I come back, I get a job as a delivery driver, and I should have never done it because I have no sense of direction. There's no GPS. I can't read a map. So I immediately get fired like a week into the summer, and I'm devastated. My ego's in the toilet. And I thought, I always had a bucket list, you know, like, okay, this is the things I want to do. Well, I said, I got to do something or I'm just going to be depressed all summer. So one of my things I always wanted to do, and I always had these crazy ideas. One was to own a pet raccoon and train it. And we tried that, and that was a failure. And so the other thing, I saw a mechanic down the street at his machine shop, and he had a rattlesnake in his garage. And I thought, how cool is that? I want to have a rattlesnake for a pet, just like that. And so I said, well, we got to catch one. So I go to the library. This is before the internet. And again, this is Albert Einstein said, education is what you have after you forget everything you learned in school. And I really believe that when it becomes your passion and you want it, you'll find it. And so I don't have a computer or Google to look it up. So we go to this place called the library. And I check out every book I can on snakes. And I learn how to catch them, feed them, care for them, watch them, what kind are they, how poisonous are they. And we go to the local reservoir and we turn over every rock and every stump, and we go for an hour or so, and we finally got one. And we caught it, and we put it in a bag, and then in a box, and then in another box. We were so scared. We triple-decked it and then threw it in my VW van and came on home. And I was living in the garage because my brothers had taken over my rooms. And so I had a bed, a dresser, and a cracked aquarium with a board and a rock on it, and a rattlesnake. And I had it all summer.
That's hilarious. And so you'd corner guys and put them next to the rattlesnake.
Well, what I did was I went off to school again, and I'd call home, hey, Mom, how's the girlfriend? How's the dog? How's the rattlesnake? And they'd say, fine. Oh, it's in the freezer. I go, what's in the freezer? My snake. Well, why is it in the freezer? Well, we got tired of being scared to do the laundry because it was out in the garage.
Yeah.
And so they put it in the freezer. It's a nice way to die. You just go to sleep. So I got married, and I kept it in the freezer next to the ice cream for the rest, like 2 or 3 years. And it was a great prank because I uncoiled it and then recoiled it in a striking position and then refroze it. And I would lay it out in different places. It was fun.
And then tell us about the story when you tried to get some darts a little more dangerous with the rattlesnake and the jeans.
Oh yeah, no, I'm broke, right? So I heard you could sell the poison. It makes penicillin. And I thought, okay, we're gonna milk the snake. It's like, all right, let's do it. So I make a loop stick, and I go down and I grab it out of the aquarium, and I pull it out. My brother, he's got the tail, I got the head, and we got this mason jar with some cloth over the top and some rubber bands, and we're going to get it so it, the fangs go down, and you press on the ducts and they drain down in the mason jar. we got that thing out, and it started going like a fire hose from hell. And my brother's got the tail, and he's looking at me like, this is not going to end well. And I got the head, and it's like just rattling and squirming. It was big. It was like 3 foot. And so we said, let's put it back. And we put it back, and we didn't bother it ever again.
That's funny. Okay, so going back to Glendora, you had your first child. Take us through how you got up here.
So I hated LA. I hated the smog, the crowd, the traffic, everything. Nice people, good school to work for, but I wanted out. It just didn't feel right. And so, I don't know. I'd spend a lot of time on my knees saying, get me out of here. I'd look out the back window of our house, and it was an alley to a supermarket. And I said, that's my view. I said, I got to get out of here. And so, so I put out 100 resume cover letters, and this is back, before internet, and I mailed them. And I went from just above the Bay Area all the way to the Oregon border, and I just said, all right, this is like prayer roulette. You land me where you want me. And I had to do an Isaac thing because I got no bites. And I had to get to the point where I said, okay, God, and really mean it. I said, if you want me to stay here forever, I'll do it. I'll be willing. And the next day, I got a lead from one of my we had played together, and then we had coached together. And his old coach was up here still in Cottonwood, and he says, "Hey, there's an opening. Tell your buddy." So Central Valley has a head coach football and English job. So I hopped in the car. And I set up my own interview, and I drove all the way up here, and I interviewed, and the guy happened to be from Orange County, and he liked me, and I got the job.
And you had interviewed before that, though. You interviewed in Trinity, right?
Yeah, Trinity, Weaverville High School. Again, cousin Chris is there. He put us up, and that was going to happen. And again, it's funny how doors just closed. That was a sure thing. I was a nice fit. Then it shut. And then I was supposed to go to West Valley in Cottonwood. Guy's wife had allergies, and there's hay fields all around, and he's moving. He's an English teacher, and there's a assistant football job open, and boom, his wife dies, and he stays. Doors shut. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm staying. And then the Central Valley job came open, and I didn't know Central Valley from New York. They've had the unfortunate disability to compete anytime. Mm-hmm. I think they've had like one good season their whole career. So it was a rough go. I'm 27 years old. I'm living out in the boonies, renting a mother-in-law cabin. I got cars that barely run. I got our first child, and I'm a head coach, and I'm doing the best I can, and with no athletes, no talent, no speed, and we're just getting the doors torn off for years, like 3 years of misery. It was tough.
What was your record those 3 years?
0-30, but who's counting? I set a California state for losing. It was a record.
That was pretty brutal. So You went from Central Valley, and then were you at Shasta next?
Yeah, so they left our district.
Central Valley did?
Central Valley, and they started Foothill. So Foothill first came in the district, and they used it as a replacement for CV. And so my principal, who had hired me at CV, had gone on to Shasta, and he was principal there. And when I was 0-28, I was going home. I ran out of gas. I did that a lot. My gauge didn't work, so I always had to guess. So here I am. I'm just like lowest of low. I'm walking down this dirt road. It's pitch black. I get home and it's midnight, and I call him and I say, "Get me out of here." I swear that's all I said. I didn't say, "Hi, this is Coach Val." I just said, "Get me out of here." And he knew my voice, I guess, because he says, "I promise I'll help you." And so he got me in. He got me a job. I'm working, teaching, and I became their wrestling coach, and I became assistant football coach at Shasta College. Another one of my buddies from Azusa, they put out tons of coaches, and another one of my buddies had come up here and taken the interim job. And that's when Jason Sehorn was there. He's the last white cornerback of the NFL.
Yeah.
Played for the New York Giants and was in the Super Bowl. Anyways, I started a Bible study at Shasta College pregame, and he was one of the first to show up. I had him and another kid, and then by the end of the season, everybody came. I had like 40 kids, and it was awesome.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And then, so timeline-wise, you guys, where were you living, and when did I enter the picture during this time?
Well, our first house was on Sacramento Drive. It was a rental, and that only lasted a while. Our first house was rented by my crazy brother Ed, and it was a disaster. I think we lost our deposit on it because I said, "I'm not living there." Like, it was covered with like rocks. It had no lawn and no trees, and I think we pulled up and it was 115 degrees, and I said, no. And so we took over. This was supposed to be a rental. I'm sorry, they were trying to sell it and they couldn't, so they rented it to us. And that lasted a year. And then I got wind of a mother-in-law quarter out on the Millville Plains, and we moved out there, and Mom didn't know anybody. So she's like a coach's widow living way out in the middle of nowhere in the country. And then, you were born on homecoming on one of my last years of coaching at Central Valley. And then we had you out on the Millville Plain house with Marissa. And then Mandy came along soon after when I had been at Foothill. Mm-hmm. We built, so Grandpa helped me out. I said, "Hey, can you help me with my first house?" And he said, "Well, why don't you get some property we both could live on?" He says, "I'm going to sell the house." And, he had the money by then. I said, "Okay." And so he bought 22 and a half acres for $80,000 back in 1989, 90. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't have a dime in the bank, and my friend didn't have a construction license, but he was getting it. So I was an owner builder, helped by a friend who was getting his license. Using land as collateral, we built the most simple house we could afford. I think it was under $90,000.
Wow.
Yeah, and we built it in the greatest March wetland they'd ever had. It rained more than ever in the whole history of Shasta County. It was a terrible time to build. Anyways, we got it built, and that's when Mandy came along, and she was born so I left that one interim year. I left CV. We're building a house. Foothill comes along, and they're housed at UPrep, where the old building is now.
So you left Shasta, not CV, right?
Yeah, I left Shasta.
So you were there for a year.
Well, check that. The next year is 1992. Foothill has its first varsity season, but they only have 3 grades. They don't have a senior class. And so I'm at Shasta half of the day. I'm at Foothill the other half of the day because I got laid off because somebody moved a decibel in the budget. And for the first month of the 92 year, I'm subbing. It's like I got a baby coming. I got no insurance. I got a house I'm building. I got to finish it. I got no income. And now I'm laid off and I'm subbing. It's like, no. Anyways, I get my job back actually in 3 pieces. I had to go to Enterprise as well, same day, 3 high schools. And after a month of that, they somehow wiggled it so they kept it to Shasta and Foothill, and I was grateful. But I was grateful. I would have worked for anything just to have a paycheck because I was so desperate. And so Mark Pettengill had come up, again, another Azusa guy. I mean, Greg Grandel at West Valley, Azusa guy. Ron Ponciano at Shasta College, Azusa guy. And then Mark Pettengill was Mike Wells's roommate when Mike first went to Azusa. So it's all in the tree. And Mark came up and he says, "Hey, why don't you come over and be my defensive coordinator for our first year of varsity?" And I said, "Okay." And so I would coach football at Foothill, have a red jacket, and then when I'd make my way to or from, I'd have to put on a purple jacket to go over to Shasta. So wrestling at Shasta, football at Foothill.
And that was like 92.
92, and we went 0-10. Again, I mean, and then even Shasta College, I think it was 5-5, but we went 0-10 because we didn't have a varsity. We were ahead 5 of the 10 games at halftime, but we just didn't have the muscle to stick around. And we ran the double wing for the first time, and we did really well scoring wise. We just couldn't hold anybody. And so the next year, you guys are all little kids, and we're at Foothill full time, and we got 4 years. We got the same kids a year later in the weight room.
Special opportunity here. We've never had seniors to take an example from, so we basically get to set the example. It's our job to take it and, decide what we have to do to set an example for the younger guys. It's really exciting.
Year-round football, getting them set, same offense, and we set this California state record for scoring. I think it was 54 points per game. We go 10-0. We go to the playoffs. We win the quarters. We go to the semis. We're peeking over at the finals, and we lose the semis in a game that went 8-9. We lost a game 8-9 after averaging 54 points a game, and we lost by 1 point.
That's crazy.
Oh, it was hard to take.
So you coached at Shasta High for 2 years then?
Yeah.
As a wrestling coach?
Yeah.
And then you had coached Bixby during that time.
Yeah.
Coach Bixby, and then he ended up coaching with you later on. Okay, so now walk us through just your years at Foothill as the football coach and just kind of the Smash Mouth identity you guys had.
Well, again, very much like Run to Danger, we had to... We were just a bunch of skinny neck, for the most part, white kids, 5-acre families, a lot of them country kids. We're the redheaded stepchild of the district. We're being bussed into an old school, borrowing a building for 8 years while ours is supposedly being built. And, and then got successful. I mean, it's one of the things to be put down for losing. It's another thing to be put down for being successful too soon. And so I would ask my guys, what do you like better? Do you want to be 0-10 or do you want to be hated for winning? And they all voted for hating for winning. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of embraced that and said, all right, we do Smash Mouth football. And it wasn't derogatory. I remember hearing it from like USC of all places, Running Back University, Mm-hmm. Just like, no, we're going to pound it. We're going to come at you, and that's a overgeneralization. Right. Of course, you're going to throw when you need to throw or whatever. But we're going to be built in the weight room, in an attitude. We're going to block and tackle. But we had to change culture. That was the big thing. It was all about culture. And like Muhammad Ali said, if you're not the greatest, fake it. We had to fake it for a while. We're going to ground and pound. We're going to run people over. We're going to Smash Mouth. And we got to get in the weight room in order to do that. We got to get the mindset. You can't play, you can't limp around with an owie. We're going to have to get tough. And so we did the same thing on defense. We went after people. We were an aggressive, blitz-oriented stunt, stuff. And then on offense, we would, it was... overload at the point of attack. We'd pull the backside, we'd down block the front side, kick out the end, and we would go for it on fourth down. We would move the change. We would eat the clock. We would keep the score close if we were under athleted, and we went to the playoffs every year after that. Never won the big one. Got close a lot. Well, I think we were runner up a couple times, third bunches of times. I can tell you every tragic loss we had.
I remember a lot of them.
Yeah.
I mean, that was what was cool, is I got to be a part of that. I mean, I think I took it for granted when I was doing it, but I got to be on the practice field almost every day.
Yeah.
Whether I came with you or Mom would drop me off, and that was so fun. I mean, to be a part of that, and then to be able to come back and coach and do it with you again, and the wrestling form. But during that time, you said you and Mark, had such a great relationship, and such a good kind of ebb and flow. But you guys use the toss from, it was Markham, right? Markham invented it.
Yeah.
And he broke some scoring records as well with it. And just kind of walk us through. So like you said, you kind of overloaded, and then you guys would switch back, right? So you would overload, and then they'd start leaning, and then you'd run the switch or however you call it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it lends itself to, you have to overreact. Like there's 11 guys on the field, so you got 5.5 on this side, 5.5 on this side. But once we're done pulling and kicking out and sending the linebacker and the quarterback and the motion back and all to one side, we have 3 to 4 more humans on one side than you do. Mm-hmm. Well, so defense would do crazy things, like they would slant to the motion, or they would overreact to the point of attack. They'd have to. And the DBs would no longer be DBs, they would be linebackers, because they'd be scooting up. Because if we could convince them, and we would really try it, we would run just the toss, some call it the pitch, some call it blast, whatever. But it's the main play. It's the off tackle C gap play. Mm-hmm. If we could, we would run that and that only the whole game. I mean, we would love to kick out that defensive end like 25 times in a row and watch him get replaced. It was so fun.
Coaches just screaming at him.
Yeah. Well, not only that, he's just dead.
Yeah.
But in realistic terms, we would run that for a couple of series, score maybe, and then once they started overreacting, you could hit a counter. And no one would be there, because they're all just racing like crazy to get a stop. They have to get a stop on this. And if that didn't work, then we would play action pass, because everybody had sucked up, and you'd throw a 4-yard pass for a 50-yard gain because no one's back there. They're all scooted up.
Right.
So they'd either overload or scoot up. And so misdirection helps. Play action passes help. Popping outside helps, because they'd all so they'd bunch up, they'd bunch in, and they'd overflow. Mm-hmm. And so a sweep would work, a fullback trap would work, a reverse would work, a play action pass would work, but only if you set the table with constant barrage of, we're coming here for a long time.
Over and over and over again. And then what inspired you to write the book?
Well, I'm an English major, and I always wanted to be published, and so it all started with that. I used to send, my goal was to get published in Sports Illustrated, and I actually sent some things, and I was ready, like this room, I was ready to decorate an office with rejection slips. I was going to paper every wall with a rejection slip until I got one, and that's how determined you have to be as a writer, and I've heard this, anyway, so I said, okay, I'm going to do it. I used to get in trouble in math and science class for reading sports biographies. That's what helped me read. Eventually, I became a better student because I fell in love with a passion, and that passion overcame my disability. That and the King James Bible, I think. Anyway, writing. So I would write articles, and I would send them in. I had my own editorial in high school. I got to write whatever I wanted about, and it became kind of popular, and that was cool. And then my senior year in college, I got my own column again, and got to write funny stuff, and I got to poke fun at stuff, sarcasm, etc. And people started regularly reading that stuff. And then I would send different articles in, and I started looking for sports journals and football journals and things like that. And I thought, well, I got one or two. I got one published, and it's called Athletic Director and Coach. I think it was the name of the magazine. It was pretty common back in the day where magazines were actually read. And I got this full page spread on the toss. And back in the day, again, pre-internet, I got letters, and I used to keep a whole box of them. I mean, letter after letter after letter, phone calls. They'd find me or whatever, and I must have sent out just gobs of it, and that was fun. I remember my grandmother; she used to send seeds around the world because she was a gardener, and in her retirement, that was her way of connecting.
Oh.
So she had the internet, but with letters, and she would put the seeds in the letter and send them out. And she would send her garden seeds everywhere.
That's crazy.
All over the world. And so anyways, I got to become pen pals with a bunch of college coaches, high school coaches, Pop Warner coaches. And that was fun. I thought, that's great. So, okay. So I'm a teacher. And it used to be, in order to get a bump in salary, you had to take so many more units of academics, according to your thing. So I was a PE teacher on the side. I had a PE minor, and I was an English teacher for my major, most of my courses. And I thought, well, I'm gonna write a manual for our coaches so they can coach this better. Plus, I'm going to try to get it published. Plus, I'm going to get units. So I went to Humboldt University, talked to their PE department, and said, I want to do this. Will you give me credit? They did. So I wrote a manual part 1, sent it in, got the credits, and had a manual for our coaches. Next summer, same thing. More units, got the credit. And now I got this volume 1, volume 2, and our coaches are very well informed of every nook and cranny of how to insert and coach our offense. And I said, you know what? I'm going to throw these things in an envelope, and I'm going to see if somebody will bite on the publisher. And again, mind you, I'm ready for rejection. I'm ready. This is a joke. I'm just going to do it for fun. And lo and behold, the first try, I get a phone call. And it's Prentice Hall. Prentice Hall, like the publishing company from New Jersey. And this wonderfully nice lady, we're good friends now, and she goes, we want to do this. I go, you're kidding. She goes, no, I'm not. We want to do that. We want to publish your book. And I said, let's do it. I thought, oh, that was easy. This is going to be a snap. From that time, it took me 2 more years before it actually got published.
Wow.
I had to do and redo everything. I mean, I had to get pictures, I had to get the captions, I had to write the table of contents, I had to write the back, the index, everything, the cover. I mean, it was hard work. And
what year was that?
97.
Okay.
Came out in 97. And again, back to the Markham connection, Phil Bravo, another Azusa guy, was coaching in Whittier Christian, and he was a Markham fanatic. And he interviewed him, he followed him, he was good friends with him. When Markham semi-retired and moved up here to Bend in Oregon, we as a staff at Foothill, back in the 92 days after the 0-10 season, we went up and lived with him for a weekend in his cabin and picked his brain all weekend and asked him every stupid question. I still have his scribbles on yellow pad. And he changed our lives. So when we set the state record in 93, in 94, he set the national record for scoring. And he only had, and let me see if I remember, he only had 18 guys on his entire team.
Wow.
They had gone 1-9 the year before. And then they went 14-0 the next year when he installed the offense. And everybody played both ways. 10 of them played both ways except the quarterback.
Wow.
And he had 3 guys go Division I off that team and just tipped the world upside down.
So 97, you write the book. and it's published in '97, and then you probably coached for what 5 or 6 more years after that football.
Yeah, so total years 19 coaching football. At Foothill, between 92 and 2002, the 11, I think it's 11 seasons. We were going on to our 12th, and then Mark got fired.
Mm-hmm. And now, so one of the toughest conversations I ever had to have with you was during my Pop Warner days. And I remember just like, I talked to Mom about it because it was just eating me alive. Because, you know, it was our dream to do football. It was my dream to do football. Like, I wanted football so bad. But doing Pop Warner, I realized I was just a skinny kid and couldn't keep up, whether it was speed or strength or power. I just wasn't clicking. I couldn't catch, I couldn't run, nothing was working for me. So I was devastated. And I remember, Pop Warner in Reading, it's 120 degrees, I'm 72 pounds, pads, it looks like King David's armor on me, and I'm, trying to waddle through track runs, and I remember the leg lifts and push-ups, and it was just hell for me. And I just remember just agonizing over this conversation that I had to have with you, because it was done. I was done playing football, and that was our dream. I had grown up on the field. Like, I got to go to every single game with you. I traveled on the bus with all the players. I got, backroom access that no one else got. I got to see you at your worst and your best as a coach back then. I remember, you and Mark just chewing guys out during halftime at times, or, some of the bonfires where everyone was, just brothers at the end. So it was such a cool experience, and I was going to miss out on that, and it totally just killed me having to tell you, Dad, I can't play football. And I remember Mom saying, he'll understand. And I didn't understand, because it broke me having to tell you that.
Yeah.
And so I tell you that, I think I did 4th and 5th grade football, and I had started wrestling at the same time, so football and wrestling went hand in hand for me as well. And I remember telling you, and you were very understanding. It was like, okay, like, that's fine. I was like, really? That's it? Like, you're not mad? Like, because, we were giving up our dream together. And, luckily for me, you were kind of forced into changing roles, because you weren't going to coach without Mark, because, you guys had gone through how many years together again? 11 years together. So you weren't going to continue on without him. And there was an off-campus coach at Foothill during that time. I was going into 7th grade, and you kind of said, hey, I'm looking to kind of take over next year. He was in construction and kind of split between two worlds anyway. And you talk us through that kind of transition, and do you remember that conversation?
Well, back to your football dream. I mean, I was a realist. I don't know if I probably...
Didn't let me in on it.
I understood you needed to get out of football. I mean, it was... and that's stupid. I mean, parents sometimes, live through their kids. It's like, no, it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
And I was always closetly hoping that you would be lousy in everything except wrestling. Like,
even when I was baseball?
Well, especially like hockey, baseball. Like, I was a lawn chair prisoner. I didn't want to be there. It's like, no, just suck, and so we can get on. We get it all out of your system. And I never wanted to say, no, you can't do that, because then it's like, okay, then he's going to really want to do it.
Right.
So I was just praying that wrestling would win out of all of them. So I just make that clear.
Yeah.
The cool part about coaching at Foothill, and you being at wrestling at Eastside at Foothill in our room, is that I could do both. Mm-hmm. I wasn't hamstrung, and then.
Well, and before that, you were already volunteering at Eastside, so you were already on.
Well,
the mat
that's what I mean.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. I mean, I could sneak over and hang out, and just I never wanted to be an official coach, so I was a helper with the club, and but I was just basically your coach,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I wanted to be that. And then the off season, I would run the freestyle part of it because no one wanted to do that, and so. And
I
that
didn't
was,
realize that.
yeah, that was freeing because, you know, that coach let me do that and let me be a part. But I was still had to do football and football off season and all that stuff. And so it was kind of freeing. It was perfect for me. But then when football was, okay, my intention was to do both. I was going to be the head wrestling coach and I was going to be the assistant football coach. And you know, it was one of those things where God ripped it from my hand. You know, with Mark, I mean, it was a shocker. It was unfair. It was political, but it was final, and that was the greatest thing that ever happened to me in a way because that took football out. And Mark and I would have tried to kill each other to keep winning, and we just got to the point where it was time, and neither of us wanted to admit it, and neither of us could see it. But it was thank God for unanswered prayers. That's off the table. Now I'm the head wrestling coach, and all my passion is going to go here. I got a chip on my shoulder. I'm going to show everybody, you know, what I can do back at head coach. And you're in the program, in the junior program, but you're an arm's length away from me. Dragged you into high school practice. That helped you tremendously. I dragged you to summer camps. That helped you. Freestyle in the spring helped you. And then Mom kind of took over as travel coach your 8th grade year. I was already at the high school trying to get the program ready for your entry.
So you had taken over. So I was going into 8th grade, and you had taken over the high school team for the first year.
Yeah.
The high school wrestling team, and what was that like? Because you had been able to travel with me before then and be my personal coach. You know, always will remember our first tournament going that we never got
car
to.
broke down.
Right. And that was kind of just a foreshadowing.
Get ready to rough times.
Yes. But we were on the way to our first wrestling tournament, and the VW Rabbit took its last breath, and we broke down and played in the snow, and it was a great time anyway. Yeah. But you had always been my personal coach and got to walk that through with me. But what was that like that first year as you took over a new program? Bixby had joined you as an assistant, but you took over this new program, and your son is getting carpooled with Mom.
Well, I think it was really healthy. I think it was good for you and Mom. I think it was good for me to free me up. And I think sometimes it's good to let your kid get coached by somebody else. I think it brings another view. I think it brings independence on your part, and you've got to sift between good and bad instruction. Mm-hmm. I think it's good for you to have to respect and honor somebody else. Obviously I was always, calling what's going on, what's going on. And then we were together forever, after that. So I think it was almost a good commercial break, because remember, up until that time, I was with you, every tournament because I was free in the winter out of football. So I don't know. I look back and think it might have been stressful not being there, but it turned out to be a good thing.
Yeah. No, I think I did a lot of growing up at that time, and I was kind of ready to take that next leap. And you had already been sending me to camps, and we started lifting 7th or 6th grade. When did we?
I think into 6th or 7th.
6th. Okay, so we started lifting, and that's really when I made that big leap into my own kind of wrestler, and had my own style, and kind of started winning. I wasn't just the low man on the totem pole anymore. Yeah. But let's go back and talk about when you took over, and this is kind of one of the reasons I started the podcast, but when you took over, walk us through your preparation for that.
Well, previous to it, I've always been good at asking questions, and I don't know if it's okay to say humble, but I've always been, I guess, humble enough to know I don't know everything.
You've always been a student.
Yeah, I guess that's more like that's probably a better word.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I'm not an idiot. I'm going to go ask the experts. If they're in my hometown and they're my rival, I'm still going to ask them. So I picked out probably 4 or 5 of the most respected people in the game, and I went and talked to them. And any camp that we would go to together or whatever, it would be my camp and my clinic. I would make it a clinic, and I would try to get to any informational stuff. And back then, the internet was just breaking, and we didn't have Flow yet, but we had DVDs, we had VCRs, we had whatever. Anywhere I could get information, I wanted it. And again, the whole Iowa schematic was another example of smash mouth football. I mean, it was like, okay, I can do this. I can out aggressive. I can outwork. I can out cardio. That's simple. I can do that. I don't have to be a wrestling guru to figure out that if I can get a kid in shape and I can somehow get in his head and make him more aggressive, then I can beat better people. Instead of waiting 5 years till we develop our program and get it in perfect sync and get feeders and all that stuff, I can take an average kid, get him in great shape, make him aggressive, get him confidence, and we could win earlier or do his best better than we can. Anyway, so it's tough when you start. It's exhilarating and it's hard when you're on your own. It's like, okay, you're it now. Tag, you're it. You're the head coach. You're the program builder. Where are you going to go? I mean, you set the schedule. You beg for money. You buy the uniforms. You set the tone. You set the culture. You set the goals. And then, you pick the style. And then you adapt to each and every kid. It's what you want to do.
Yeah, so walk us through your interview process. As you were starting the program, you talked to kind of everyone and anyone. Talk us through that, and then talk us through the original Run to Danger story.
Max Birch was a good one. I took him out to coffee. Again, he's the local legend. He was the guy that took 5th in state way back in the 80s. His sons were really good up there, and champions, top 2, top 3. He's originally from Oklahoma. Knows all about the Oklahoma State program. Was awarded with Coach of the Year nationwide back in the 90s. By the time I got to know him, he was just still almost a retired woodshop teacher at Shasta High. But I had heard so much about him, and I didn't take him under my wing, but I adopted him as part of my rebuild on Shasta, and then also picked his brain for a year later when I took over at Foothill. He's one of many, but anybody I took out, and all the experts basically had it down. They said, if you want to be good up here in the north, you got to leave. You got to get out of town. You got to travel. You got to make money to spend money. You have to go compete where the tough guys are. We're in a weak section. We're in the largest section in California, but body-wise, it's got the fewest people, and so we have the weakest competition besides San Francisco, or LA. But you got to go compete all over the place. So when these guys get to state, they're not blown away.
Right. And your conversation with the Shank, one of the Shank brothers, right?
Yeah, I mean, I turned everything into an interview. He and I were doing a CPR class together to get certified for coaching. And he had done he and his brother both made it to the Division I level, and I think multiple colleges in their career, and they were local heroes. But now they were coaching, they were getting in the coaching thing, and they were young. But I said, hey man, you're one of the guys that made it. You're one of the guys that went from here to big time. I said, I'm hearing that you gotta get out of here. He goes, oh, no doubt. He says, yeah, you got to run to danger. And I said, oh my gosh. And when he said it, I said, I'm sorry, but I'm stealing it. I said, that's it. That's what I've been looking for.
Mm-hmm.
We have to run to danger. It doesn't say you're going to overcome danger or win or dominate. You just have to run. You have to acclimate. You have to get used to it. And it doesn't mean you have to go and get slaughtered everywhere. But unless you recognize those faces in the tunnel or on that bracket when you get down to Bakersfield, you're dead already. You know, it's a waste of a 7-hour drive.
Right.
So that was the goal. From then on, whether it was tough practices, lifts, runs, camps, clinics, or tournaments, everything was meant to acclimate, to run to danger, to find the toughest places at Fresno, Bakersfield, Gilroy, wherever we could go to find that. And I tell kids, I said, listen, I'm going to state. I may go in a bus, I may go in a van, or I may go in a Prius, but I'm going to state with somebody who wants to be there. And that's another thing that I did early on. I go, I'm going to set the level, and everybody's going to benefit. Even if you can't walk and chew gum, you're going to get better. But those who really want it, this is why we're doing this. This is the ceiling. So if you get up here, we can go compete. And I don't want section placers. I want section champs. And I don't want, just state qualifiers. I want state placers. And then someday maybe we'll get a state finalist or a state champ. But that's the goal. And so that's what we're working. So you think I'm crazy, understand, it's a crazy goal. It's an impossible high standard. So if you don't like it, I don't care. You can go back to
T-ball.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I think that's a good time to end it. Thanks, Dad.
Okay.
Our world was outside. There was no reason for us to stay in the house. So, Teddy DeMello, a guy who we grew up with, he's turning 60, and I've known him since the 3rd grade, and we're still the best of friends. And he grew up in a rough situation. His dad wasn't around much, and his dad's super great guy, and he's home, and he's definitely in his life now and so forth. But when I knew Teddy, it was his mom who was raising him, and she had problems with alcohol. It loved her, and then I didn't have a dad in my house, so we would say, "I'm spending the night at your house, you spend the night at my house," and then we just run the streets. So we kind of that was typical for us because there was no reason there was no video games, no all night anything on TV. It was, a good example is we had a friend, Wolfie, and that's a whole different podcast. I mean, holy cow. But Wolfie was another kid, and he showed us how to make money one night. Him and Teddy DeMello went over to Tipper's Lounge over at the corner there where Teddy DeMello drove his mom's car through the wall. Another story. But Wolfie would sit out there and he could make himself cry like drop of a hat. These drunk guys would come out at midnight, the bar, and they'd be drunk, and me and Teddy behind a car, and Wolfie would just start crying. And this guy, what's wrong? He goes, I was going to my mom, my dad died. And he'd come up with these stories about he's crying, and I was going to buy chicken pot pie, but this guy took my money. His kid took my money, and so, and we'd make $4, $5, $6, $7 in about a half hour. And then we'd go over to Arturo's, the pizza parlor, because they're open until 2 a.m. They didn't care that we were only 12, and we'd be in there playing pinballs and,